prison ward of County Hospital recovering from shock. He was going to see her. He invited me to come along. What's your opinion, Lieutenant?
It's not a matter of opinion, Counselor. My job is to find the murderer, and everything points to her.
Such as?
Motive. Carter was opposed to her marrying his son. They had a fight, she admits it. From there on, the story goes completely haywire.
The unknown fat man entering the apartment, stabbing Carter, walking out, it's a phony.
You sure?
Well, I tried to prove otherwise. Let's take the murder weapon. It came from Ann Marlar's kitchen, and she claims the fat man took it out of his overcoat pocket. Okay, but where did he go after he left the apartment?
Well, he ran away.
There wasn't time. Ann's on the 3rd floor. There's only one staircase that leads out of that building. He either had to go up or go down. Yet seconds after Ann screamed, the tenants came running out. They didn't see him. Where did he go?
Maybe he didn't go anyplace. Maybe he stayed right there on the 3rd floor.
Oh, believe it or not, Counselor, but we had the same idea. 4 minutes after the killing, 2 squad cars arrived, and my men searched every apartment, and there was no trace of it.
Well, it still doesn't disprove Ann's story. As I understand it, Elston Carter wasn't exactly popular.
Sure, he had a flock of enemies. But we couldn't find one of them with reason enough to have wanted to kill him. And there's one thing more, Counselor. Ann has a friend, a very dear friend, lives in the same apartment building right across the hall from her. Her name is Ginny Talbot. She says her door was halfway open that evening. She saw Elston Carter go in. She was sitting right there in the living room watching television, and she didn't see anybody else.
Tell me, Lieutenant, do you think Ann Muller's guilty?
No. But I've been wrong before.
Come in. I'm certainly very glad to have your help, Mr. Morris.
Well, I really don't know yet if there's anything I can do. I'd like to talk to Miss Muller.
Of course. I suppose you'd like to speak to her alone?
That's right.
I'll see you tomorrow, darling. Don't be afraid.
How are you feeling, Miss Muller?
You don't have to pretend, Lieutenant. I know the procedure. First the pleasantries, then the threats. Finally, the forced confession.
I can assure you, Miss Muller, the police don't work that way in this country.
But a lieutenant is still here to get a confession from me, isn't that so?
If you killed Mr. Carter, confession would help.
If I still tell you I didn't?
And we'll try to help you to prove it. So far, there's no trace of this fat man. Think hard, Miss Muller. Try to remember something that could help us.
I've tried. I can't. I can't think anymore. This reminds me of when my father and I were arrested. I'm not a fighter, Lieutenant. I wish I were, but I can't fight. If you want me to say I killed Mr. Carter...
Nobody wants you to say anything but the truth. Anne, didn't you once study to be an artist?
I started to. A very long time ago.
This man that killed Carter, do you think you could make a sketch of him?
A sketch? I don't know.
That's a good idea, Herb. It'd help a lot more than the description you were able to give us.
All right. I'll try.
Good, I'll get a pencil and paper.
Miss Morris, I didn't mean to sound bitter.
I understand.
It's just that it took such a long time to believe that something as wonderful as Brian was happening to me. In a week, we'd have been at Brian's country home on our honeymoon. Now... Thank you.
Been through all the mug books, and so far, Herb, we haven't found anything that even comes close to this.
It's a rough sketch, Lieutenant. She only saw him for an instant.
If she actually saw him at all.
You still so sure she didn't?
Let's be realistic, Herb. I had that printed in all the local newspapers. If he exists, wouldn't somebody have known him? Or at least seen him?
Maybe he was brought in from some other place to do the job.
The hired killer?
Why not? As I understand it, Elston Carter wasn't mourned by anybody, not even his own son.
I checked on that angle, too. Brian Carter was on a plane heading for the coast when it happened. Besides, what would he have to gain by his father's death? He had plenty of money in his own right. He didn't need his father's. As for enemies, sure, Elston Carter had a flock of them. But none of them with reason enough to have killed him or paid to have it done.
Then that leads us right back to the fat man. Find him and the case is solved.
Quit harping, Herb. I'm sending this to police departments all over the country. If he exists, we'll find him.
Good. But Lieutenant Weston didn't share my certainty that Ginny Talbot was involved.
Well? Oh, well, we checked her over. There's no reason to believe she lied as far as I'm concerned, Herb. You're just acting on a hunch.
She lied to me about the door chain being new and obviously had been up there for a long time. And why did she change her story about always keeping a door open?
You probably confused her with a lot of your questions, but that doesn't incriminate her.
How soon after your men got there did they check Ginny's apartment?
About 5 minutes afterwards.
Which would have given the murderer plenty of time to get away. Did your men consider the fact he might have gone down the fire escape? With Ginny's cooperation, he could have been safely off the street in 1 minute flat.
That's pretty close, Herb. But I checked on it myself. 50 seconds to be exact. Sure, Ginny Talbot could have been in on it. So could any of the other tenants in the building, but I checked on them, too. You know, look, Herb, I'm tired. I've had a long day, and, well, I'd like to go home.
One more item, Lieutenant. What do you know about mink coats?
Mink coats?
Suppose a girl had a mink coat, was going to take a trip. What would you do with it?
Store it. Well, what's that got to do with Ginny Talbot?
Huh? Oh, nothing. Ginny had a mink coat hanging in her closet this afternoon. Said it belonged to a friend of hers who had to go out of town. Wanted to keep an eye on it.
Your office told me I'd find you here. Listen, anytime you want to join the force, I'll give you a good recommendation.
Ginny Talbot?
The mink coat. We checked with every furry in town this morning. We found one who sold a full-length coat to a girl answering her description. I think you earn the right to sit in on this one, Herb. Shall we have a talk with that furrier?
I'll come with you now.
Herb, you know a person who snaps his fingers when he's nervous?
Brian?
I don't know how common a mannerism that is, but by itself it doesn't mean much.
He was the one that stood to profit the most by his father's death. Enough to make it worth a $5,000 coat.
I wouldn't say that, Herb. The kid's not rich, but he's got plenty of money of his own.
I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the desire for self-respect, to escape domination.
The kid's pretty weak.
His father's refusal to let him marry Anne could have been the proverbial straw. Brian didn't have the courage to do it himself, so it's logical that he's the one that hired the paid killer.
Not to mention that as far as the murder knife is concerned, or the duplicate key, you wouldn't have any trouble getting him.
Where are you going?
What do you think?
Hello?
Herb, Weston. Any idea where a young man about town might go to forget his troubles?
He's not home?
Brian left his house in a hurry. Told his butler he wouldn't be back for a few days, and Ginny Talbot is missing.
I see what you mean. If Ginny Talbot could prove that Brian plotted his father's murder.
They try to get rid of her fast, but where?
It'd be pretty hard to do in the city, wouldn't it? Where would he take her? Not back to his place. Wait a minute. You're looking for a young man about town with a house in the country. Anne said she and Brian had planned to spend their honeymoon there.
I'm beginning to think you're in the wrong racket. I could use a guy like you in the force.
Then you won't mind if I come along.
I'll get the address and pick you up in front of your building in 5 minutes.
Hey, what brings you two up here?
We've got a new angle on your father's murder, Brian. We'd like to tell you about it.
Well, I was just leaving. Suppose I meet you in town.
Suppose we talk about it right here and now.
Where's Ginny Talbot?
Well, how would I know?
Well, let's go inside and have a look.
We can't.
Why?
There's a man standing by the window, watching us.
Your hired killer? The man who killed your father?
You know.
Yes, Brian.
I want you to know something else. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but I had to kill my father so that I could live. The way things were, being afraid all the time, I was dead. Tell Ann I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt her.
We'll talk about it later, Brian. Tell your friend to come out.
You better have your gun ready, Lieutenant. Just in case. I told him you're out here, Willie. Come on out.
All right, Willie, get up. You're not hurt that bad. How's Brian?
Dead.
Well, I warned him if he tried anything funny.
I wonder why he did.
Maybe he didn't want to stand trial. Or maybe he was just trying to prove something to himself. That he wasn't completely weak.
All right, Willie, let's go. Miss Talbot.